But do you realize that marijuana is not like other forms of dope? You see, it grows wild in almost every state in the Union. Therefore, there is practically no interstate commerce in the drug. As a result, the government's hands are tied. And frankly, the only sure cure is a widespread campaign in education.
I mean, the campaign to stigmatize cannabis, was a good 100-year campaign.
Here is a most tragic case. A 16-year-old lad apprehended in the act of staging a holdup. 16 years old and a marijuana addict.
A shrinking number of people that are generally older that have negative outlooks because they were just raised in an era where they were propagandized with a lot of very incorrect information, and a lot of people retain that information.
Yes, I remember. Just a young boy. Under the influence of the drug, he killed his entire family with an axe.
Oh my!
Fall of 2009, there were about 3,900 people with medical marijuana cards. And you went from that 3,900 in the fall of 2009 to, by the next spring, 20,000. 2011 comes, we get the federal raids. The Montana cannabis industry filed a lawsuit against that law. They got 4 provisions enjoined. The industry could keep functioning, which it did for the next 5 years. We get to 2019, we pass a law that closes loopholes. At the end of the session, we get the national group shows up to want to do a adult use initiative in Montana. 2021 legislative session rewrote that law and gave us a completely different model than what was in the initiative. 2022, they started implementing adult use in Montana, and here we are, worried about overproduction in 2023.
So I'm Brett Flower. I'm one of the owners of Nomad Canna. I've been in the industry now for 6 years. So getting the cannabis flower to the point of sale is a very long road that I think a lot of consumers really don't consider. From the time it's a baby up until on the shelf, depending on how you grow, it can be anywhere from 4 to 6 months.
The cloning process is literally just cutting shoots off of the plant, shaving the outer layer of cells off the bottom of that shoot, dipping it in a rooting hormone, and then putting it into some sort of system that continues to keep that bottom shoot moist. Once you are ready to flower, they generally move things to a 12-hour light, 12-hour dark cycle. It's actually the exposure to dark that signals the cannabis plant to tell it to start flowering. And then depending on the line of cannabis, it takes anywhere from 7 to 11 weeks to complete its flowering cycle.
So making sure the consumer gets a good final product is a huge goal of both the providers and the state division. We want to make sure that what they are getting is clean, both of pesticides, metals, microbials. So we have to go through some pretty rigorous testing. They take what's called harvest lots or batch lots, and then they send it through. There's about 16 different tests they do on it. And then there's some optional ones that we can do as a research and development internally if we're trying to dial in our products a little more fine. So one of the major categories of cannabis products would be pre-rolls. With us, we have a machine that's called a bump box. It loads in 169 cones. It vibrates, you slowly pour the material in, and at the end, the staff hand tamps it. We can produce anywhere from 500 to 1,000 a day with our current production.
Back in the 90s, research on cannabis discovered what we call the endocannabinoid system, and that is a system of receptors throughout the body, cell receptors that are mostly located, concentrated in brain cells and nervous system cells. We have naturally produced chemicals called anandamide that antagonize these receptors, and that causes an effect in the body, depending on which cells are being antagonized. THC, which is produced in the cannabis plant, also antagonize these receptors.
So a lot of people have different views on cannabis. I do believe it has medicinal properties. When I got licensed, my grandma recently had been diagnosed with cancer. My dad had some other personal health issues going on.
They were taking 1 or 2 very important drugs that kept them alive. The rest of the medications were chasing down symptoms. They start using medical cannabis, and now all of a sudden they can start knocking drugs off that list. until they get down to the point where they only have to take that 1 or 2 drugs necessary to keep them alive, and then they can mitigate all those symptoms with cannabis.
Grandma had never even seen a little nug of weed in her life. She started nibbling on edibles. She was able to sleep through the night, minimal pain. My father was taking 8 to 10 medications a day. He chopped it down to 3 within 60 days.
I remember one patient in particular. This person had a very severe case of cerebral palsy to the point where they were essentially a quadriplegic. Before the cannabis, they couldn't talk. They couldn't move their jaw properly. After exposure to cannabis, they were able to move their head. They could have a conversation with the person that was taking care of them. The quality of life change there was stark.
In the state of Montana, we control who is capable of applying for licensure for the adult use marijuana market, regardless of which individual type of job, business, etc. they want to be taking on.
As a member of the cannabis industry in Montana, I do have some pretty positive feelings towards it. Montana has geared a lot of it to be very friendly towards the medical providers that were in existing operation.
I think from the perspective of the actual providers of cannabis, the industry in Montana is pretty great. There's a diverse group of people that provide these services. They work together to lobby various organizations around the state to protect their ability to make sure they can continue to provide access to this medicine to their patients. And a lot of them are doing a really, really good job.
For the folks who decided to stick with us and play by the rules, we felt that they deserved the first shot at the adult use marijuana industry, and because we had worked with them for so long, we knew that these were good actors.
We have had to pass medical cannabis twice through referendum. We passed it in 2006. The government tried to take it away from us in 2011. They actually passed legislation to get rid of medical cannabis in 2011. Thankfully, Governor Schweitzer at the time vetoed that legislation, but his veto was immediately followed by those federal raids.
Additionally, when you have the state, county, and city levels, they all can decide to regulate you individually. So on the state level, I'm licensed, I'm legal. Back in 2018, on the county level, they decided to change where I was operating, how they zoned it. I got a cease and desist. I had to kill all my plants, get rid of all my patients, move to another county, and start from ground zero.
Situation we have right now where the federal government still hasn't backed down, that creates this quasi-legal situation that makes things really, really hard to work out.
Some of the labeling and packaging requirements are pretty strenuous. Additionally, with how we have to track all of our inventory, there's very minimal room for error, which in any other business, human error is a massive contributor.
Once we passed our second referendum letting them know that they are not going to get rid of it, then those people transferred over to, okay, how can we make it really hard for them to actually run these businesses? And then the wave that comes after that is the greed. How can we extract revenue from these industries?
I think a lot of the initial passions and the dedication to the medical customers has really been lost. It is unfortunate that a lot of it is tailored now to the recreational market and generating as much tax dollars as we can for the state. I still personally like to take a large focus on the medical patients when they come in. Education and dialing in the correct product that they need to help their ailments is the end goal.
We must work untiringly so that our children are obliged to learn the truth, because it is only through knowledge that we can safely protect them. Failing this, the next tragedy may be that of your daughter, or your son, or yours, or yours, or yours.
So tired of the premonition and all the lies that hit like knives in the back. Keep twisting little by little. See how much I can stand before I crack. This game's become tell me, 'cause I've no clue, my friend. The only thing I know for sure is that this is how it ends.